Welcome to Lifestyle Solopreneur, the community for entrepreneurs who put lifestyle first. Join your host, Flavia Barris, as she interviews successful lifestyle solopreneurs and shares ideas to help you find the perfect balance between lifestyle, business, and self. Flavia is an attorney, marketing expert, and founder of several online academies. She's been featured in major media, including BBC World News, The Wall Street Journal, The New York Post, ESPN Television, and more. Join us for this episode of Lifestyle Solopreneur.
Hey, Lifestyle Solopreneurs. Today we get to speak with Alex Smerec. He is the co-founder and CEO of Franzy. It's a platform that transforms franchise discovery by connecting entrepreneurs with thousands of opportunities. He previously founded 2U Laundry and also LaundroLab, scaling both into nationally recognized brands. He is the host of the How I Franchise This podcast, and he is here to share his wisdom. Welcome to the show, Alex.
Thanks for having me, Flavia. I am incredibly excited to talk all things entrepreneurship, business, franchising, starting young, everything in between, and excited to get into it with you.
And you're the perfect person to speak on sort of all those topics because you've founded companies, right? The 2U Laundry and LaundroLab. And then you've also been huge in the world of franchising and now help other people in that world of franchising. So I want to hear a little bit about your story, right? Your origin story. Like, how did you get from someone who, we're all born into this world, probably not knowing anything about franchises, but you are now where you are today. So tell us how you got there.
Yeah, I'll try to give you the abridged version, but I grew up in a small town in Minnesota. It's called Red Wing, and the only reason you might have heard of it is because of Red Wing shoes or Red Wing boots. They're a fairly well-known like work boot and lifestyle boot now as well. But the town is 15,000 people, and I'd say half of the town works for Red Wing shoe. So I grew up in a small town in the Midwest, and very early on, I remember one of my first kind of entrepreneurial aha moments was my dad would be golfing all summer long and working really hard in the fall and the spring when it's freezing and in the winter in Minnesota when it's mostly cold and snow. And I asked him, I was like, how are you able to do this? Most of my friends' parents are working 9 to 5 or some form of 40 hours a week somewhere else. And how are you able to be doing this? And he very early on in my life told me, Alex, you can work for someone else. You can work for yourself, which is what he did. He was 100% commission sales. He was a financial advisor. He's like, or you can have people working for you. And he's like, if you want the ability to kind of work on your own terms, you've got to be doing one of the latter two buckets. You got to either work for yourself or have people working for you. And so really early on, that kind of exposed me to, hey, there is another path other than just going to go work for, quote unquote, the man or at a Fortune 100 or Fortune 500 company. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I just knew if I wanted that kind of freedom with my time and as well as, financially, that entrepreneurship or sales of some sort was going to be a path for me. So fast forward to college, I decided to leave Minnesota, ended up at Wake Forest University. But that's where I really got into entrepreneurship. I did a college laundry and dry cleaning pickup and delivery business called Wake Wash, and I loved it. I was learning more doing that, running that business than I did in any class I took at Wake. I had a team of people running the bags from on campus to off campus, vendors I had to work with, marketing, negotiating contracts with the universities. Like really young and really early on, got exposure to that level of kind of managing various different functions and organizing and exposure to like real world business problems and skills. And then I was also learning all the academic side of things. And every class I was in, I would say, how does this impact Wake Wash? How many more, instead of a case on Delta and how many more passengers they could fit on a plane, how many more laundry bags could I fit in a Sprinter van? And, so it just made everything much more real and applicable to me. So I ended up selling that business. It's funny I say, I didn't want to necessarily go work for the man because what I did after college is went and worked for Ernst & Young for about a year and a half doing financial services consulting. And I thought, this would be, as far as corporate jobs go, pretty entrepreneurial. I'll jump from project to project, see different problems, see different teams. But for the most part, it was that. And I did enjoy it, but not nearly as much as I did the college laundry business. So I love the people I worked with, but was not fulfilled by the work I was doing. And I knew this can't be it. This can't be what I do the rest of my life. And I saw all these Uber for X businesses pop up. So your Instacarts and your Ships for grocery delivery, your Wags and your Rovers for dog walking. And I thought someone is going to do this for laundry and dry cleaning, and I'm going to really be upset with myself if it's not me. And so I started a company in 2016 called 2U Laundry, which was basically what I did in college, but on a larger scale was the goal. Is how do we build the first nationally recognized brand in laundry and dry cleaning at scale? And so we started in January 2016. Fast forward 8 years. We had raised 33 million in outside capital and venture capital. We scaled the business to 17 million in revenue. And then in 2018, in that process, started to realize we can't outsource all of the cleaning, all of the laundry to mom and pop laundromat owners anymore because the quality just isn't where we need it to be. And so we started vertically integrating in 2018 and building physical laundromats through a partnership with Electrolux. And that started to work incredibly well. We now had a walk-in customer using the equipment 7 days a week. But then when the store was slow, we'd shut down half of the footprint and do all of the pickup and delivery volume that we were doing through the same, washers and dryers. So we're all high-fiving, like, this is the model, let's go scale it out. And fast forward 2 years, we realized laundromats aren't cheap. They're $1 million each to build. How are we going to open hundreds of these without raising a ton of capital or, this taking 30 years? And our answer was, well, why don't we franchise the brick and mortar laundromat? We'll layer the pickup and delivery business on top of it. And it'll be this perfect marriage. They complement each other. And so we started franchising LaundroLab, the other business you mentioned, in 2021. And we sold 118 franchise locations in about 14 months. We actually intentionally turned off franchise sales because we'd sold more than we anticipated, and then started really focusing on how do we get these stores open, get the cost for the build as low as possible, site selection, marketing, training, all those things that go into franchising. And through that experience and that crash course of franchising, saw how great the franchise model can be, but also some of the pitfalls of, how people do diligence, how they find the right brand, working with a business broker, and seeing that these business brokers in many cases would take a 60% commission on the franchise fee. And I thought, wait a minute, my dad's been in sales, my brother's in sales. I've never heard of a 60% commission. There's just a lot of misalignment. These people that are betting their life savings, gambling a lot of their time and energy onto running a business might be being led down the wrong path unknowingly because of the lack of regulation and the lack of aligned incentives on the brokerage side. So that led to this idea for Franzy, which is what I'm working on now, which think of it as the Zillow for buying and selling franchise businesses. Fully democratized marketplace, 4,000 brands on the platform with investment costs, revenue potential, and then free coaching, help with financing and lenders, getting your book stood up and your entity formed. Kind of soup to nuts or idea to open. Franzy helps an individual navigate that entrepreneurial journey of buying a business, whether it's their first time or their 20th time. And so I know a very long-winded answer, but wanted to give you the context of why entrepreneurship, what I've been working on the last decade or so, and what we're focused on now.
What a journey. So let's take it a step back for anyone listening who just has a very vague idea of what a franchise is and is thinking maybe just McDonald's or one of those like fast food brands. Let's talk about franchising. What is franchising as a model, and why would it appeal to solopreneurs and sort of small time mom and pop entrepreneurs, as well as obviously big time established businesses?
Yeah, and that's what I think I love about franchising, is because I used to have this kind of misnomer about franchising and thinking, like you said, it's only McDonald's, it's Subway, only really wealthy people can get into it. And the other brands that are available, they're not worth my time or the money. And unfortunately, that's not the case. But because I think of some of the lack of regulations around the brokering piece or the diligence piece, I think it has led to some negative outcomes that have, along with the saying of one bad apple can ruin the whole bunch. And I think that's happened here. But the more I've gotten into it, the more I realized the franchise business model is a great one for whether you're a first-time entrepreneur or you're this multi-unit operator that has 50 locations, 50 Taco Bells, 50 McDonald's, and there's a lot of those out there. And the reason it's so great is it takes away a lot of the guesswork or even some of the table stakes or basic things that, a lot of us as individuals could figure out, but they just add time and cost and complexity. And, with complexity comes risk. Franchising is this model that allows Alex or, Flavia to come in and say, hey, I have the capital. I'm willing to work hard, but I don't want to have to deal with menu innovation and building technology or a operating system or a brand from scratch, or I'm not sure about real estate and site selection or construction and getting open. And we might have skills in one arena, but not skills that touch all 15 arenas that you have to do within a franchise, or any independent business. And what franchising does is gives you that kind of cheat code, or I'll even go as far as saying a shortcut, because you have a franchisor who's developed all those things. They have the back of house operating system. They've got the menu. They've got the supply chain figured out. If it's food, if it's a home services franchise, they have a brand. They have technology for booking and attracting and acquiring customers and then retaining them through email nurturing and SMS nurturing. They have employee shift, scheduling tools. Like, they've thought of all of these things so that, your main priority is doing sales to some degree, but then also just operating the business, not having to do all the other kind of peripheral stuff. And so, long answer short, franchising is a model where you get to buy into a system, and a series of playbooks and training in exchange for a percent of your revenue. Royalties or what those are called. So you'll pay a percent of your revenue back to the franchisor in exchange for, again, that accelerated learning, know-how, training, resources, supply chain, group buying, technology, all of the above. And I think, again, it's a great way to get into business ownership, whether you're a first-time entrepreneur or someone to expand their existing portfolio of restaurants or home services from 20 locations to 50 locations. I'm a franchisee myself, and I love it. There's certain models where, and certain brands and verticals, it makes a lot of sense, especially.
And so can it be a side gig? Or for someone to dive into the world of franchising, do they have to make it their one thing?
The answer, and I know it's a frustrating answer sometimes, but it depends. I'd say most are not side gigs. And I think, unfortunately, some brands, even as well as some of the brokers that I mentioned, will position things as a side gig because it allows them to sell more units. But I think the really good brands are very upfront out of the gate. And those, that's a good sign when someone's being honest with you and saying, hey, look, Flavia, I'm not going to sell you some dream on this is only 5 hours a week and it's mailbox money. I would say the majority of franchise brands, just like an independent business or just like you getting into short-term rentals and commercial real estate, there is always going to be hard work and there is no shortcut. Now, that said, you can maintain a full-time job and start to spin some of these things up, but you're still going to have to find the nights and weekend hours to put, at least 20, 30 hours additional a week in on top of your day job to get it to a point where it could replace your income. And at that point, you could quit your job and go full time. I do see a number of people doing that, but I think the chances of success are significantly increased when you go all in. And that's true for franchising, true for real estate, true for independent businesses. I don't think there's any form of entrepreneurship where you can take half measures or quarter measures and hope to get rich quick.
Makes sense. And you've gone into a lot of detail about who franchising could be for, but are there any people that you think franchising is not a good fit for?
Yeah, I think almost the inverse of what we just said. I think if someone's listening and says, I've got some money saved up, if I just put 200 grand into this business, it'll run on autopilot. And that's what I'm looking for. Like, I would say 90% of brands in franchising wouldn't be for you. Then there are some semi-absentee brands, again, that can work, but they're very few and far in between. So I'd say franchising isn't for that group that doesn't want to roll up their sleeves, isn't willing to do the work, and isn't committed to thinking and acting like an owner, just like you would your own home or your car, even to a degree. Like, if you spend a lot of money on certain assets, you hopefully have some pride in them and you take care of it. I don't think a business is any different, whether it's franchise or not. So someone who's looking for a shortcut, I don't think franchising, you're like a complete shortcut where you're not going to be hands-on. I think franchising isn't for you. And then if you're the kind of person that can't stomach, risk, I'd say, or things not always following path point A to point B, there's going to be nights where you're going to lay in bed and be like, why did I do this? I had a good thing going at the bank or wherever I was before. And when I left work, it wasn't my problem anymore. I could leave it at the office. Whereas franchising and business ownership in general, it's yours. It's part of your life. It's part of your family's life. Your spouse and kids are likely involved to some degree, or at least impacted. And there's going to be nights where you're laying there thinking, oh my gosh, a customer just fired me, or I got all these negative Google reviews, or 3 people called out tomorrow and I'm going to have to go in and figure it out. And there's going to be moments like that happen. And I think an individual's ability to have thick skin, to persevere, are 2 of the qualities and characteristics I think you really have to be successful. So I'd say if you're incredibly risk averse and you get sick at the idea of someone calling out or disagreeing with you, or a customer firing you, then I would say entrepreneurship in general, but also franchising, wouldn't be for those individuals as well.
I think everyone pictures the sort of typical franchise that comes to mind, right? Like food and some of the brands that you're just commonly seeing out there, and you're like, oh, that's obviously a franchise. But I know there are a lot of, especially new franchises, that are pretty unusual. Like I think there's some like dog walking business franchises, and not just in the pet world. I think there's a lot in education and elder care and so many different fields that someone may not realize. You have a franchise opportunity in that sort of niche market. What are some that you've seen come to market that are maybe unusual, but really interesting to you? Not necessarily the brand itself, but tell us sort of the niche or what area of business that it's in, because I think people would love to hear some of that.
Yeah, so I think when you see these macro trends or like societal trends taking off, a lot of times business follows and things pop up. So one that I find really fascinating and exciting right now is golf. Golf for a while, I think, started to be on a decline because it takes 5 hours to go play, maybe even 6 by the time you load everything up and drive back and forth. And people are just busy and busier than they've ever been. And so 6 hours on a weekend is just, harder and harder commitment, but people still enjoy the sport. And then there was the Netflix effect, right? I forget the name of the show. Is it Swing? But it was kind of like what they did with Formula One and the Netflix show that they did on Formula One. And now Formula One's become so much more popular. Netflix had a similar impact on golf. And then Tiger Woods and Rory did stadium golf together, and then like the Live tour. So there's all this like energy and excitement around golf. And so golf simulator franchises have really taken off, and people want to go practice and play more, but again, they don't want to spend 6 hours. And so they can go play Pebble Beach in the middle of winter in Minnesota in an hour without having to pay hundreds of dollars on flights and green fees, or going in on a weekend somewhere. They can go after work on a Wednesday and play 18 pretty quickly on a golf simulator and still get obviously not the full experience, but call it 60, 70% of it for a fraction of the cost and a fraction of the time. And so that's an interesting trend right now, is indoor golf simulator franchises. There is a ton in home services and health and wellness. And a trend that I'm seeing in general is there's a lot of fear and uncertainty around AI potentially disrupting white collar jobs. And so people starting to question, what am I going to do with myself if 20%, 30% of the workforce, or people working jobs behind computers, get displaced? And so there's a lot of people starting to bet on themselves and bet on ownership. And so that's just like a larger trend that we're seeing across franchising, and home services being one of those categories, because robots probably aren't going to touch that for a while. And if they do, the owners are going to be the ones benefiting from that, and reducing labor costs and other expenses. But if it's specific brands that are interesting, there's other trends around reinventing some of these like traditional businesses that we used to see. So one example is this company called Allsies, and it's like the 21st century ice cream truck. So you actually can request it on an app. They'll drive into the neighborhood, and so all the neighbor kids and families will kind of have like a group text or a text chain. They'll say, hey, we're going to request Allsies to come in. And I think there has to be like a minimum number of orders that the neighborhood makes in order for the truck to come. But it's kind of like the good old neighborhood ice cream truck on demand, and low startup costs, good revenues, and it's a fun, interesting business.
Oh, that's great. And I always thought that anything that entertains kids, I'm a parent, and I got to tell you, like when I find something that my kid loves to do or that brings joy to their face, and I want to do more of it. So I'm loving this ice cream idea. That's so cute. So
and there's a ton around like kids parties too. Like when you mentioned that, there's like these inflatable bounce castles and kind of like one-off entertainment, systems and toys, like those are becoming franchises now, where you can book whole parties and setups that a franchisee will come out, set up for you, take down, and you can have these kind of extravagant parties centered around kids and entertaining everyone. But yeah, to your point, it's really amazing how franchising touches everything.
We focus on lifestyle here at the Lifestyle Solopreneur podcast because it is very, very easy to be a terrible boss when you're your own boss and drive yourself sort of crazy with staying up all night and, like you said, lying in bed and stressing about your job and worrying. And a lot of entrepreneurs, they left their corporate job or maybe just a really hard job that wasn't in the corporate world, but maybe even just physical labor because they needed more rest for their bodies and rest for their minds. But in entrepreneurship in general, where does franchising fit in to that spectrum of super busy 100-hour weeks versus passive income? Like, where are we with franchising?
The answer hits this kind of life cycle curve. I think in the beginning, it is very hard. And just because it's new, you're building from scratch. And I'd say that first year, maybe year and a half at most, is grueling and it's tough and it's hard. And I'd say lifestyle is not out the window, but very difficult to manage. But then on my podcast, I interview all sorts of franchisees, some that are just getting into it, some that own 180 plus locations of something. And so I get to see all these different individuals and groups at different stages. And I can tell you with pretty strong consistency that after that year and a half, and you start to see success, you can hire a GM and you can start to travel more, barely be involved in the day-to-day of the business. And then you start adding a second location and a third and a fourth. And some of these folks that are up to even 5 locations of something have not only completely replaced their income, but are making $500,000, $1 million plus a year, all because they were willing to make that sacrifice the first 18 months and like really grind into it and really work in and on the business at the same time, which is hard. And so to answer your question, I'd say it starts out not passive at all and like very involved, and over time can become one of the most rewarding, most passive, financially free and time-free things that you can do.
And sort of on that topic, how do you personally stay sane? Is it you have some hacks, some secrets you want to share, maybe some tools? Because I know you probably get pulled in a lot of different directions, but how do you keep that balance in your own life?
Yeah, the short answer is I'm still figuring it out, but I'm 33 years old and I have my first child, my wife and I, we just had 4 months ago. And so, we're learning to navigate focusing time on him and each other while also having these pretty, big aspirations and goals. Started a couple businesses already onto this one, but now starting to open franchises on the side, now starting to invest in other startups on the side. And it's just all of these things take time. And the answer to me is still like, I'm in that kind of grueling stage. I've extended it almost intentionally because our goal, it's not necessarily like get as much money as you possibly can, but like we want to have and create generational wealth. And that's just our specific goals. We want to work towards that where we could be retired fully at the age of 40. And, with us being 33, we've got 7 years. We really got to continue to grind it out if we truly want to be done and fully retired at 40. And at that point, only working on things because it's pure enjoyment and fulfillment. I don't think I'll ever fully stop, but having that safety net in your back of your mind, allowing you to work purely on things that you enjoy is, I think, one of the most liberating kind of things we could achieve. And so that's our goal. And I think that answer is different for everyone. But so how I manage that is we really get organized. We have to say no to a lot of things. We have to prioritize almost daily what's the most important thing for us to do that day. And, me and my wife check in often about that. And we hold each other accountable to what are the things that we're going to make time for and what are the things that we're just going to unfortunately have to say no to.
Your podcast is hosted by you. It's called How I Franchise This. Tell us about the podcast.
Yeah, so the idea was, obviously we want to inform and educate people on franchising and just small business and ownership in general, given the impact, again, it's had on my life as an individual. It is, I said it on the intro, it's the most fulfilling, rewarding thing I think I've ever done. And so with our podcast, we're trying to show our audience that look at all these different walks of life, different backgrounds, different types of people, upbringings, stories, capabilities, and look how they found their way into doing this, and showing you and giving the audience courage, and a person they can look at and say, hey, that person has a similar career path that I had, and they look like me, they sound like me, they act like me, and they did it. Like, I can do this. I can go and figure this out. And our goal is to give people that confidence to take that initial leap, which is the hardest part. Once you jump off and you start, I know it's cliche, but you start building the plane as you're flying, like, you start to realize, like, hey, this is tough, but it's not so bad. Like, I can do it. It's like, I think anything else that's hard in life or intimidating, like going to the gym, I use a lot. Like, a lot of people don't want to go to the gym because they're like, I don't know how to use all the equipment, and there's all these people there that are stronger than me, and they're going to judge me. And I think it's like, as long as you go in and you do one push-up, and then the next day go in and do 10, and then next thing you know, if you keep that consistency and you take that leap, you'll be one of those people in there that knows how to use all the equipment, and now it's part of your lifestyle and it's part of who you are and your identity. But that first jump and that first few weeks is just scary. And so our goal with the podcast is, let's make it more accessible, more welcoming, more create more confidence and encouraging people to take that first step.
I always ask guests, do you have a resource or some kind of a tool or a freebie, something to offer to listeners of the podcast? And then we put those in we call it the vault, it's podcastguestgift.com. And we put them all there for anybody to go and browse and look at all of the tools and, value adds and freebies that our guests provide. When we asked you that, I was like kind of blown away, because you said $5,000 for people who buy a franchise through Franzy after listening to this podcast. And so I took notes, I wrote that down, and I just wanted to put that out there for the audience, that you're being extremely generous. And I think for anyone listening who's getting really excited about the world of franchising and thinking, this might be what I'm meant to do next, what would you say to them? Where can they follow you to learn more information about Franzy and what you do?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I think there'll be a link in that vault that Flavia just mentioned. That'll take you to the Franzy website, where you can start exploring brands. You can get free coaching from me and other people that are on our team that are franchisees themselves. We've been through it. We've looked and scoured through brands. We've found lenders and financing, all those things you have to do. We help you with, all free of charge for you. We get paid by those service providers, and we get a flat success fee from brands for driving leads to their business models. And if it's a good fit in the marriage, we get paid a success fee. So all of these services are free for people that are exploring buying businesses. So definitely check out that link in the vault. And then if you want to connect with me directly, I'm on TikTok and Instagram and LinkedIn, and my handle is Alex from Franzy. And on LinkedIn, I'm just Alex Smernak, my last name. And then feel free to shoot me an email directly as well if you want to ever catch up and just talk through ownership, entrepreneurship. And my email is alex@franzy.com.
Alex, you've been so generous, and everything you've been saying is just really interesting. And I think especially for anybody that hasn't yet leapt into entrepreneurship. I mean, we have plenty of listeners who are already invested and, in their own startup or business. And so they may think, okay, too busy to do something new. But a lot of us listening are not doing anything new yet. And we're just waiting for that right idea, that spark to kind of take off and to take us away from what we're doing today. And I think maybe franchising is the answer for a lot of people listening. So thank you for sharing your wisdom and for spending your time with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me and allowing us to share our story and to be a resource for those ready to make that jump.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, and if you leave a review on iTunes, I promise I will read every single review. If you know someone who makes a full-time living from part-time work, and maybe this is you, please visit lifestylesolopreneur.com to nominate a guest or to nominate yourself. Because remember this, money doesn't buy happiness. But money in the hands of a happy person, there is no greater tool.
Today's episode was brought to you by the Get Shift Done program. It's a lifestyle-changing online class to help you define your business and lifestyle ambitions, and to set goals in a way you've never experienced before. This class will 10x your daily productivity with methods that will blow your mind. And if you use the coupon code podcast, the class tuition is 99% off. Visit GetShiftDone.com to enroll today.